This is Akashvani. In the program Spotlight, now we bring a discussion on strengthening India-Australia relations. The participants are former diplomat Skand Ranjan Tayal and Sonu Sood, Akashvani correspondent.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in Australia yesterday on the last leg of his three-nation tour of Japan, Papua New Guinea and Australia. He met with CEOs of Australian companies and prominent public figures of Australia in Sydney. He also attended a community event and addressed Indian diaspora in Sydney today. To discuss the various nuances of Prime Minister's Australia visit, we have with us Skand Ranjan Tayal, former diplomat. Mr. Tayal, a very, very warm welcome to you on Akashvani.
Thank you.
Sir, if we talk about Prime Minister's Australia visit, how do you see this visit strengthening the India-Australia relations in the coming days?
India-Australia relations have been growing very strongly in the last 10 years or so. We all remember that even after India got exemption in the nuclear suppliers group in 2008, Australia had not supplied uranium to India. But in 2011, the then Prime Minister got this legislation passed in Australian Parliament. And since then, the relations have improved by leaps and bounds. And particularly after Prime Minister Narendra Modi came here in 2014, first year of his Prime Ministership. And after that, in 2020, the relationship status was raised to comprehensive strategic partnership.
The Prime Minister said that he wants to take the relationship with Australia to the next level and also explore how we can identify new areas of complementarities and expand our cooperation. So which all areas do you see India and Australia having synergy in and supporting each other and moving forward together?
Prime Minister talked about 3 E's, that energy, economy and education. That is one particular area. Then in the defense sector also there is lot of friction which is on the cards, and the most important issue is the supply chains. That supply chain should be resilient and countries should not be dependent or over-dependent on one country, and that reference is to China. And this issue came up in the G7 meeting in Hiroshima also. And when we talk about resilient supply chains, then there is a very important place for India. That India has the capacity, the capability, the manufacturing skills and resources to emerge as a very important partner in resilient supply chains. And that is one area where India will work together with Australia. There is a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement which is under discussion, and also Prime Minister referred to a economic cooperation and trade agreement, ECTA, which has already been signed in 2022. So the direction is clear, and with the personal interest and energy given by the two Prime Ministers, there will be more results in coming months.
Now, in this wave of multilateral meetings of different groupings, we saw that in G7 meeting in Japan, a lot of progress was made. Can you tell us something about that, the Hiroshima meeting, what was the outcome, and also the outcome of the Quad meetings which were held in Hiroshima again?
In Hiroshima, G7, of course, they had their own statements. India was a guest country. Our Prime Minister was invited as a special guest. And his objective was more that G7 should also be sensitive to the issues of the global south. And that is where the emphasis of India has been, also as chairman of G20. And Japan, as chairman of G7, clearly acknowledged, said and promised that G7 would also look after the interests of the global south. I think that was one big achievement of Prime Minister Narendra Modi's leadership and his articulation of the concerns, particularly about food and fertilizers and energy, which has been an unfortunate outcome of the Ukraine-Russia conflict. So that is one. Now on Quad, the quadrilateral dialogue between United States, Australia, India and Japan is emerging as a very, very important forum for keeping Indo-Pacific peaceful, stable and progressive, developing. In fact, the meeting of Quad with 4 leaders was to happen in Australia, but President Biden had to return to United States, and this Quad meeting took place in Hiroshima itself. The Quad is getting more and more acceptability among the countries of Indo-Pacific. Republic of Korea, President Yoon is also looking for cooperating with Quad. It is a future-oriented forum, and the objective is very, very inclusive, that Indo-Pacific should continue to be a peaceful, stable region. And we all know that challenges are coming from China because of its expansionist policies in South China Sea, in East China Sea, and the 4 leaders always meet to give the Quad thinking a direction and to include other countries to cooperate more with Quad decisions and actions.
Today in his address, PM said, today IMF considers India a bright spot in the global economy. World Bank believes that if anyone is challenging global headwinds, it is India. And banking system in several countries are in trouble today. But on the other hand, the strength of India's banks are being appreciated everywhere. And now, how do you see India's position changing in the global world order after the way we have withstood these challenges of COVID and Ukraine-Russia conflict? How do you see India emerging as a leader in, let's say, different areas, be it economic, strategic or defense areas?
India has been dealing successfully with our developmental challenges and with the very high rate of growth, which of course the challenge came first from COVID, and our economy also suffered, but we have come out of it much better than other countries. And also the COVID-Russia conflict, which had a huge impact on energy, food, fertilizers. India has been able to deal with it in a reasonably successful way. And the world is watching, and we the fastest growing economy among the larger economies. We are already the 5th largest economy of the world, and very soon we will be the 3rd largest economy after United States and China. And when the banking system in America is coming under so much pressure with banks failing, then in that context, the Indian banking system is very robust and doing very well. As Prime Minister referred that 40 crore new accounts were opened in India for the poor. It's a huge number. It's very impressive. And you look in South Asia, the economies of Pakistan, Sri Lanka, they are in great trouble. So in all that context, India is a shining star of stability, both political stability as well as economic stability.
One aspect which the PM brought up was climate change. How do you see this being tackled with cooperation between developed and developing countries? The thorn of climate finance has continued to be a problem for the developing countries. Do you see the developed countries ceding on this issue?
We as developing countries have to keep on pressing the developed countries to meet their commitments. They had made these commitments in Paris, but they have not been met. But what the Prime Minister Modi is showing to the world is that all of us can ourselves do a lot, whether it is by solar energy, wind energy, by changing to electrical vehicles, and all kinds of ways energy consumption can be reduced. And there is no need of sacrificing development. On that, India is very clear, and very bluntly it has told the developed world that the developing countries will continue to grow, continue to develop, and whatever energy requirements are there, that they will meet. So this pressure must remain on the developed countries to meet their financial commitments. Let us hope that they do it, but it has to be done both unilaterally, that every country should do whatever it can to prevent and stop climate change, but also together, where there is a lot of responsibility on developed countries, because they are the ones to bring the whole world to this stage by their overconsumption of energy.
PM Modi also said that world's biggest talent factory is in India. How do you see this aspect of our strong demographic dividend? Can you tell us a little bit about the strength of the Indian diaspora in Australia, and how is that a linking factor to, cement the relations between the two countries?
In Australia, there are about 800,000 people of Indian origin. That is about 3.1% of Australia's population. And there are about 77,000 students who are studying here and also working and contributing to Australia's development. And Prime Minister rightly said that India has such a pool of talent, skills, and also he referred to the cultural values. And these three totally integrate with the Australian thinking. And Australia is welcoming for overseas talent. It's a huge landmass. Population is just less than 3 crores. And they are welcoming people from India. There is already a migration and mobility partnership agreement which is being discussed between Australia and India. Prime Minister referred to it in his address to the persons of Indian origin, where the skilled professionals would be able to come and work here for some time, like the H-1B visa with the Americans have, something similar. And that is where the demographic dividend of India will be of use to Australia.
And if we talk about economic ties and trade ties, how do you see this visit impacting the flow of investment from Australia to India, flow of FDI, companies coming from there and setting up base here, as we are seeing in a lot of other, areas? We are seeing Apple coming here and many other major multinationals coming here. So do you see that flow getting a boost?
The two-way trade is more than $40 billion already. The companies in Australia, the big companies, are mostly in mining and natural resources, not so much in manufacturing. So in fact, in the mining sector, investment has been from India to Australia, because we import Australian coal and also Australian gas we will be importing and other things. Now, there is a comprehensive economic cooperation agreement which is under negotiation between India and Australia, which will facilitate more trade and investment both ways. And also, economic cooperation and trade agreement has already been signed in 2022. So the framework for enhanced trade, greater investment, more professional services, all that is there. And the work is also going on. And as Prime Minister said, the direction for future growth will be in the energy sector, overall economy, and in education sector, because the recognition of degrees, on that also work is going on, that the Indian degrees are recognized in Australia and Australian university degrees are recognized in India.
And lastly, do you feel that defense cooperation between these two countries is imperative for peace in the Indo-Pacific region?
Very much so, because ultimately the defense of Indo-Pacific navies will be very important. There has been irregular visits by navies of India and Australia to each other, port calls. There have been bilateral maritime exercises, and there could be real-time intelligence sharing. There is some talk that, like the movement of submarines in Indo-Pacific of other countries, that could be monitored and shared. So there is already a lot of dialogue, interaction in progress between defense forces of Australia and India, and it will become more and more focused in the years to come.
Mr. Dayal, thank you so much for this discussion on the various aspects of India-Australia relations and how you see them strengthening and developing in the future.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on strengthening India-Australia relations. The participants were former diplomat Skand Ranjan Tayal and Sonu Sood, Akashvani correspondent. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on a mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on a YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 9289094044.